What would you do if a billionaire disguised himself as a poor man and begged you for food? Thinking face, would you share your last meal with a stranger, not knowing he's one of the richest men in the city? This poor woman did exactly that, but when she later discovered the shocking truth about his identity, her world shattered. Broken heart, she felt betrayed, used, and heartbroken. But here's the question. Can a love that began with lies survive? Can wealth ever buy genuine love? Or will kindness and forgiveness rewrite their story? Stay with me, because what happens next will leave you speechless. The city glowed under the pale light of a drizzling evening. Neon signs flickered over the bustling streets, and the impatient blare of car horns cut through the rain-soaked air. Expensive cars splashed water as they sped by, the world of luxury rushing past without a second glance at the forgotten faces sheltering under shop canopies. Among the shadows moved a man who looked no different from the weary street wanderers, dressed in faded jeans, a frayed jacket, and worn-out sneakers that had seen better days. His face was partially hidden beneath a hood, but behind the disguise lay Cola Benson, one of the country's youngest billionaires, a man whose name alone opened doors and bent rules. Tonight, however, he wanted no doors opened, no privileges granted. He had left behind the towering glass walls of his mansion, the marble floors, the gleaming chandeliers, and the staff who never allowed his hands to so much as lift a glass of water. Instead, he carried nothing but a few crumpled notes shoved into his pocket. Cola had grown weary, tired of boardroom politics, tired of endless parties filled with fake smiles, but most of all, tired of being loved only for his wealth. Women who swore they adored him melted away the moment he spoke of simplicity. Friends who pledged loyalty did so only as long as his pockets remained heavy. To them he was not a man but a vault. That was why he found himself here, deliberately disguised, deliberately stripped of status. He wanted to test the world, to know if genuine kindness and true affection still existed outside the cage of money. The rain slicked off his jacket as he wandered through a row of roadside stalls. Vendors shouted over each other, trying to lure customers with steaming bowls of food, the smell of roasted plantain and bean cakes rising into the night air. Cola's stomach growled, loud, urgent, and painful. For the first time in years, hunger bit at him like an uninvited guest. He slid his hand into his pocket, pulling out the few notes he had carried. They were barely enough for a single meal, and even then, the vendor he approached looked at him with suspicion. "Not enough," the man barked, eyeing his shabby clothes. "Go somewhere else." Cola's lips parted to argue, but he swallowed the words. He had chosen this path, chosen to be seen as nothing. He moved on, ignored by others, his billionaire identity hidden beneath raindrops and shadows. As he walked, a pang of doubt crept in. Would this journey of disguise really bring answers? Or was he only punishing himself with a loneliness he had never truly known? Still, he pressed on, his heart quietly determined. Somewhere in this sprawling city, he hoped to meet someone who could look past wealth, past status, past disguise, and see only the man he truly was. And so, drenched and hungry, Cola Benson took his first step into the world of the poor. The drizzle faded into a humid night, leaving the streets damp and gleaming beneath the flickering glow of street lamps. The city, relentless as ever, pulsed with life. Vendors fanned smoke over their stalls, taxis honked in frustration, and laughter spilled from small roadside bars where cheap beer flowed freely. Yet in the middle of all this noise, Cola Benson stood still, his hunger gnawing deeper with every breath. It wasn't the hunger of someone who had skipped dinner for a business meeting or forgotten to eat during a day packed with phone calls. No, this was different. This was raw, aching, bone-deep hunger, the kind that burned in his stomach and made his knees weak. He had never felt it before, not truly. At home, meals appeared like magic. Chefs rotated menus, nutritionists calculated calories, and he never had to ask twice. Hunger had been an abstract concept, something he read about in reports on poverty, never something he lived. Now it was his reality. Cola stopped near a stall where a woman turned roasted corn over glowing charcoal, the golden kernels crackling as the fire licked them. The aroma was maddening, smoky, sweet, irresistible. His throat tightened as he reached into his pocket, fingers curling around the last few crumpled notes. He stepped forward and quietly asked, "How much?" The vendor's eyes swept over him, lingering on his faded jacket and scuffed shoes. Her lips twisted. "You don't have enough. Go find something cheaper." Cola tried again at the next stall, a small pot of bean cakes sizzling in hot oil. The vendor barely let him finish before shaking his head, dismissing him with a wave of his hand. "No charity here. Buy or move on." Each rejection stung sharper than the last. People brushed past him without a glance, some even stepping around him as though he were invisible. In his penthouse, he was a name whispered with reverence, a figure that commanded attention. But here, stripped of the armor of wealth, he was nothing more than a nuisance, a hungry man with empty pockets. His stomach growled again, louder this time, forcing him to bend slightly as though trying to silence it. He pressed a hand against his midsection, his pride bruised by the simple fact that he, Kola Benson, could not even buy roasted corn. For the first time in years, vulnerability washed over him. He remembered his childhood before his father's company had taken off, days when his mother would stretch a single meal to feed everyone. He had buried those memories under years of excess, but tonight they returned with full force. The streets around him buzzed with people chasing their own survival. A taxi driver haggled with a passenger, a child tugged at his mother's wrapper, a hawker balanced a tray of oranges on her head. Nobody noticed the man standing on the edge of the road, trembling from both hunger and shame. Kola closed his eyes briefly, the drizzle returning as a fine mist against his skin. Maybe this experiment had gone too far. Maybe he had been foolish to think he could step away from privilege and survive as an ordinary man. Just as despair settled over him, a soft voice broke through the noise of the street. "Are you hungry?" His eyes flicked open. A woman stood in front of him, her expression gentle, her hands clutching a small nylon bag of food. She looked poor, her clothes worn but clean, her face tired but kind. And in that moment, Kola realized his night was about to change forever. The woman's voice was soft, almost swallowed by the chatter of the night market, but Kola heard it as clearly as if she had whispered directly into his heart. He blinked at her, unsure if she was truly addressing him. People rarely looked at him when he wore this disguise. They passed him like smoke, as though poverty itself made him invisible. But this woman was different. She stood just a few steps away, holding a thin black nylon bag that sagged slightly at the bottom, betraying the weight of food inside. She was not beautiful in the polished, artificial sense he was used to, the kind that required designer clothes, makeup, and practiced smiles. Instead, she had a quiet, natural beauty. Her skin glowed faintly in the dim street light, her hair tied back simply, and her eyes, large, weary yet kind, studied him with an empathy that unsettled him. Kola straightened slowly, swallowing the lump in his throat. Yes, he admitted, his voice low, almost ashamed. "I haven't eaten." The woman didn't recoil. She didn't laugh or look down at him the way the vendors had. Instead, she opened her nylon bag and pulled out a carefully wrapped portion of food, rice mixed with beans, the aroma rising faintly through the damp night air. The portion was small, barely enough for one, but she tore it in half without hesitation. "Here," she said, extending a piece toward him. "It's not much, but it's something." Kola froze. His pride wrestled against his hunger. All his life, people had handed him food plated on gold-rimmed china, served by waiters in crisp uniforms. Now, a poor woman, who clearly had little to spare, was offering him her last meal. Accepting felt wrong, yet refusing would dishonor her kindness. He reached out slowly, his fingers brushing hers as he took the food. Warmth traveled up his hand from that brief touch. He whispered, "Thank you." The woman smiled faintly. "Don't thank me. Just food. We all need it to survive." They walked a short distance together, finding an old, broken bench by the roadside. The bench creaked under their weight, but neither seemed to mind. She unwrapped the rest of her portion, sitting gracefully despite the rough surroundings. Kola mirrored her, his hands trembling slightly as he unwrapped his share. For a moment they ate in silence, the world bustling noisily around them. Each bite Kola took was humbling. The food was plain, yet it tasted richer than any gourmet dish he had ever eaten in his life. It carried the flavor of sacrifice, of compassion, of humanity stripped bare. Between mouthfuls, he stole glances at her. Her clothes were modest, her slippers worn, and yet she carried herself with quiet dignity, as though poverty had not broken her spirit. When she noticed his gaze lingering, she chuckled softly. "Don't look so surprised. The world may be cruel, but kindness costs nothing." Kola's heart stirred. In that moment he realized, this stranger had given him more than food. She had given him a glimpse of the love and humanity he had been searching for all along. The broken bench groaned beneath their weight, but neither Kola nor the woman paid attention. The night air carried a faint chill, the kind that seeped through thin clothes and made one crave warmth. The food in Kola's hands felt heavier than its size suggested, not because of its weight, but because of the meaning it carried. She had given him half of her last meal. The rice and beans, wrapped in a reused plastic sheet, was unevenly cooked, grains sticking together, beans slightly overdone. Yet to Kola it looked like a feast. He hesitated before taking his first bite, his pride still whispering that he shouldn't be accepting charity. But then his stomach growled again, sharp and insistent, reminding him that hunger knew no pride. He lifted a spoonful and tasted it. The flavor was simple, a mix of salt and smoke from the firewood, but it filled him with a gratitude he couldn't explain. Each bite seemed to erase layers of arrogance he hadn't realized he carried. For once, food wasn't about presentation, courses, or reputation. It was survival, and it was shared. The woman chewed slowly, clearly rationing her portion so it would last. She glanced at him occasionally, her eyes warm but curious, as if studying his every move. Finally, she broke the silence. "You don't look like someone who belongs on the street," she said gently, her voice neither accusing nor mocking, just observant. Kola stiffened, swallowing hard. "What do you mean?" She smiled faintly, shrugging. "The way you hold the spoon. The way you sit. Even the way you say, thank you. Different. Most men I've met in your situation are rough, quick, always suspicious. But you seem like you came from somewhere else." Her words pierced deeper than he expected. He forced a weak smile. "Maybe I did. Life has a way of bringing people down, doesn't it?" The woman chuckled softly, though there was no bitterness in her tone. "It does. But it can also teach you things no school or rich life ever will." They ate in silence again for a while, the sounds of the city filling the gap between them. Hawkers shouted their wares, buses rumbled by, and children laughed in the distance. Kola stole glances at her hands, thin, calloused, the nails worn from labor. She had the hands of someone who had struggled, yet chosen kindness over bitterness. When they both finished, she carefully folded the empty plastic wrap as though nothing, not even waste, should be discarded carelessly. She looked at him with a calm expression, then offered a smile that was small but genuine. "I'm Amara," she said simply, as if the introduction required no fanfare. "Kola," he replied, almost forgetting that this was the name he wanted hidden tonight. For a brief moment their eyes locked and Kola felt something shift inside him. It wasn't attraction in the shallow way he had known before. It was something deeper, an awakening, a sense that this woman's kindness had given him more than a meal. She had given him hope. The night deepened, the glow of street lamps softening into a hazy blur as the sounds of the city grew distant. Kola and Amara remained seated on the old bench, their stomachs no longer groaning with hunger but filled with something richer than food, a fragile sense of connection. Kola leaned back, watching the way Amara adjusted her wrapper against the chill breeze. She seemed so composed despite the evident weight of hardship resting on her shoulders. He found himself studying her face, the quiet strength in her eyes, the faint lines of exhaustion around her mouth, the resilience that seemed woven into every gesture she made. Amara caught his gaze and tilted her head slightly. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she asked, a half smile on her lips. He looked away quickly, embarrassed. "I'm just wondering. You gave me your food even though you had so little. Most people wouldn't do that." Her smile softened, though her eyes turned wistful. "When you have nothing, you learn what truly matters. Money can disappear, jobs can vanish, even family can be taken away. But kindness," she paused, looking at the busy road ahead. "Kindness is the only thing we can choose to give, no matter how little we have." Her words settled in Kola's chest like a weight, pressing against every memory of betrayal and false love he had endured in his gilded world. He wanted to tell her who he was, to reveal the truth burning inside him, that he wasn't just a hungry stranger, that he was Kola Benson, the billionaire she probably only knew from news headlines. But he bit his tongue. Revealing his identity too soon would ruin everything. He needed to know if her kindness was genuine, untainted by money. "What about you?" he asked, changing the subject. "What's your story?" Amara exhaled slowly, her shoulders slumping under an invisible weight. "My story? It's nothing special. I grew up here in the city. My father died when I was young and my mother has been sick for years. I used to work as a cleaner in an office, but the company downsized and I was let go. Since then I take odd jobs, washing clothes, selling little things on the street, just to keep us alive." She hesitated, then added softly, "Some days I don't eat at all so my mother can." Kola's throat tightened. He had heard countless stories of hardship, but never so directly, never so unflinchingly honest. And yet, despite it all, Amara spoke without self-pity. Her tone was calm, her face resolute. "I'm sorry," Kola murmured. "That must be very hard." Amara shrugged lightly. "It is. But I can't give up. My mother depends on me and I still believe tomorrow can be better." Her optimism stunned him. Here was a woman who had every reason to be bitter, yet she radiated hope. Kola felt something stir deep within him, a pull stronger than attraction, a respect born from witnessing true resilience. For the first time in years he realized he wasn't lonely anymore. Sitting on a broken bench, eating scraps of food, he felt more alive than he ever had in his mansion filled with empty laughter. The rain returned in light drizzles as they rose from the bench. The market was closing down, stalls shuttered, hawkers packing their goods. Kola hesitated, unsure where to go. His penthouse was only a short drive away, if he wanted it, but in this disguise calling a chauffeur was out of the question. Amara noticed his hesitation. "Where will you sleep tonight?" she asked. Kola hesitated. I haven't figured that out yet." Her brows knit together. "You don't have anywhere?" He shook his head, playing deeper into his disguise. The truth was complicated. He did have somewhere, but that wasn't the point of this journey. He wanted to experience life without privilege, to strip himself bare of wealth's safety nets. Amara studied him for a moment, then sighed. "You can't stay out here. It's not safe. Come with me." Before he could protest, she was already leading the way. Her stride was brisk but graceful, weaving through narrow alleys until they reached a small, crumbling building. She pushed open a rusted door, revealing a dimly lit room no bigger than Kola's walk-in closet. The roof leaked in patches, buckets strategically placed to catch drips. A worn mattress lay in the corner, covered with a faded sheet. The air smelled faintly of damp wood and kerosene. "I don't have much," Amara said apologetically, "but at least it's dry." Kola stepped inside, his chest tightening. He had spent nights in five-star hotels, suites with marble bathrooms and private pools, yet here in this tiny space he felt something unfamiliar: humility. Amara fetched an old mat and spread it on the floor. "You can sleep here," she said firmly. "I'll be fine on the bed." Kola tried to protest. "No, I can't take your mat." She cut him off with a look. "You're my guest tonight. Don't argue." Her tone left no room for debate. Kola sank onto the mat, humbled. She disappeared briefly into a corner and returned with 2 chipped cups filled with tea, the steam rising faintly. "It's weak," she admitted, handing him one, "but it helps on nights like this." Kola took a sip. It was indeed weak, watery even, but it warmed him in ways no expensive wine ever had. He watched Amara sip hers with quiet contentment, and he realized she had just given him everything she could: food, shelter, warmth, dignity. As the rain tapped against the roof, Kola lay back on the mat, his heart full. He had set out to test kindness, to see if love could exist beyond wealth. Tonight, in this leaking room, he found his answer. Days turned into weeks. What began as a single act of kindness grew into an unlikely companionship. Amara allowed Kola to stay with her, though she never asked too many questions about his past. She simply accepted him as he appeared, a man down on his luck, trying to survive. Kola, for the first time, tasted the rhythm of ordinary life. He followed Amara to the marketplace, helping her carry baskets or set up small wares for sale. When she found laundry work, he assisted by rinsing clothes at the stream, his hands blistering from labor he had never known. At night, they sat in a tiny room, sharing laughter over weak tea and scraps of food. It was in those moments that Kola discovered the richness of simplicity. He had once measured life in profit margins and luxury acquisitions, but Amara measured it in small victories. A day her mother ate well, a day she sold all her oranges, a night without rain seeping through the roof. Her joy in the little things began to reshape his understanding of happiness. Amara admired him too. Though she didn't know his true identity, she noticed his gentle manners, the way he treated strangers with respect, the patience in his voice when children crowded around him. Most men in her world carried anger in their eyes, bitterness in their words, but Kola was different. Kind, attentive, and strangely humble for someone who, by his speech and bearing, clearly wasn't born into poverty. Their bond deepened quietly. When Amara fell ill one evening from exhaustion, Kola stayed up all night, cooling her forehead with a damp cloth and coaxing her to sip water. When he twisted his ankle carrying laundry, she scolded him gently, then massaged his foot with practiced hands. These small acts wove a thread of intimacy between them, delicate but strong. Yet beneath it all, Kola lived with a gnawing guilt. He was hiding the truth, the fortune, the mansion, the empire that awaited him. And every day he spent with Amara, the secret grew heavier. Still, he told himself, "I must wait. I need to know if her kindness is real, if her heart can love me without the weight of money." One evening, as they sat outside watching children chase each other in the dusty street, Amara glanced at him with a curious smile. "You know," she said, "sometimes I wonder about you. You don't talk much about your past. It's like you're running from something." Kola's chest tightened, but he forced a chuckle. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm just searching for something better. Amara nodded thoughtfully. Aren't we all? Her words lingered long after, echoing in Cola's mind as he realized how deeply he was falling for her. Not for beauty, not for gain, but for the strength of her soul. The day the truth began to unravel was hotter than usual. The market buzzed with restless energy, vendors shouting louder than normal as the sun bore down. Cola had gone with Amara to buy a few essentials, carrying her basket as they moved through the crowd. Then it happened. A sleek black SUV screeched to a halt at the edge of the market, its tinted windows reflecting the chaos of the street. A group of suited men spilled out, their eyes scanning frantically. Shoppers paused, curiosity piqued. The men looked out of place, polished, commanding, clearly from a different world. "Sir," one of them shouted the moment his eyes landed on Cola. Relief spread across his face as he pushed through the crowd. "Sir, we've been searching everywhere for you." Amara froze, her basket slipping from her hands. She turned sharply to Cola, confusion and shock flashing in her eyes. "Sir?" she repeated, her voice trembling. Cola's disguise crumbled in an instant. The men bowed slightly, ignoring the curious stares of the market crowd. "Mr. Benson, please, we must return immediately. The board is in chaos, your absence has created headlines." The name hit Amara like a blow. Cola Benson. Billionaire. The same man she had seen once on a newspaper cover, smiling in a sharp suit, his face framed by headlines about wealth and power. Her breath caught in her throat. She stumbled back, her mind spinning. The man she had fed, sheltered, laughed with, was no beggar at all. Cola's face paled. He reached toward her. "Amara, wait, let me explain." But she shook her head, stepping away as betrayal clouded her features. The crowd whispered around them, the market now alive with speculation. Amara's eyes brimmed with hurt, her voice breaking. "You lied to me. All this time, you lied." Cola's heart sank as he realized the truth was no longer hidden, and the love he had so carefully nurtured now hung on the edge of ruin. Amara's chest rose and fell rapidly as if she were running, though her feet were rooted to the ground. She stared at Cola, but all she saw was a stranger. The man she had let into her home, the man she had trusted with her scarce food and laughter, was not who he claimed to be. The suited men hovered nearby, bowing their heads respectfully to Cola while throwing disapproving glances at Amara, as though she were nothing more than a distraction. The divide between worlds had never felt sharper. "You're Cola Benson," Amara whispered, her voice breaking. "The billionaire. All this time you let me believe you were poor." Cola stepped closer, his hands outstretched. "Amara, please. I never meant to hurt you. I needed to know if someone could love me without the money, without the power. I wanted to see kindness that wasn't bought." Her lips trembled, anger mixing with heartbreak. "And you chose me as your experiment? Do you know what it feels like to share your last meal with someone, thinking they're as desperate as you, only to find out it was all a game?" "It wasn't a game," Cola pleaded, his voice urgent, raw. "It was the only way I could find the truth. And you proved it. You showed me real kindness, real love." But Amara shook her head, her eyes brimming with tears. "No, you lied. Every word, every silence, it was a lie. You let me pour out my heart, let me believe you were one of us, when in truth you've never known what it means to starve, to sleep with rain dripping on your face. You stole my trust." Her voice cracked, but she stood tall. "Leave, Cola. Go back to your world. I don't want to see you again." Cola's heart twisted. He wanted to argue, to explain, but he saw the pain etched in her features, the betrayal carved into her soul. Anything he said now would sound hollow. The men tugged at his sleeve, urging him to leave. With a final, desperate glance at Amara, Cola allowed them to guide him away. Amara stood frozen, her arms wrapped around herself as though to keep from falling apart. Around her, the market resumed its bustle, but she heard none of it. All she could feel was the ache of betrayal, the cruel reminder that in her world even kindness came with hidden costs. That night, alone in her small room, Amara wept into her pillow. The mat where Cola had once slept lay empty, mocking her. She had believed in him, trusted him, even allowed herself to dream of something beyond poverty. Now those dreams felt like ashes. Days passed, but Cola could not rest. Back in his mansion, surrounded by luxury, he felt suffocated. Meals were served, yet he barely touched them. Business partners sought his attention, but his mind drifted elsewhere. Every corner of his home reminded him of Amara, the broken bench where they had shared food, the leaking roof that had sheltered them, her laughter over weak tea. He knew he had to win back her trust. Not with words but with actions. One morning, Kola made a bold decision. He called the press, his board members, and even community leaders to gather at the public square. By noon, the place was swarming with cameras and curious onlookers. Reporters jostled for position, eager to know why the elusive billionaire had called such a sudden meeting. Then Kola stepped onto the platform, not in a designer suit, but in the same shabby clothes he had worn in disguise. Gasps rippled through the crowd. He held a microphone, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "My name is Kola Benson," he began. "Most of you know me as a billionaire, a CEO. But recently I walked these streets in disguise, searching not for profit but for truth. And in that journey I met someone who changed my life." He scanned the crowd, his eyes locking onto Amara, who had come reluctantly, curiosity tugging her despite her hurt. She stood at the edge, arms folded tightly. Kola's voice grew louder. "This woman, Amara, gave me her last meal when she thought I had nothing. She gave me shelter, dignity, and kindness, not knowing who I truly was. I lied to her, yes, and I regret the pain I caused. But everything she gave me was real. And today I kneel before her, not as a billionaire, but as a man begging for forgiveness." To the shock of everyone, Kola dropped to his knees on the pavement, cameras flashing wildly. The sight of the powerful billionaire bowing before a poor woman sent murmurs racing through the crowd. "Amara," he said, his voice cracking, "I will spend the rest of my life proving that your kindness wasn't wasted. Starting today, I'm funding shelters for the homeless. Your mother will receive the best treatment money can buy. But beyond all that, I want you to know, I love you. Not because of what you gave me but because of who you are." The crowd erupted in applause, some moved to tears. Amara's eyes widened, her heart torn between hurt and hope. She had never imagined such a scene, never dreamed a man of his stature would humble himself so publicly. But even then, forgiveness was not immediate. She turned away, her heart pounding. Kola's words had reached her, but the scars of betrayal still burned. Weeks passed after Kola's public declaration. True to his word, construction began on shelters for the homeless, funded entirely by his wealth. Amara's mother received free medical care at one of the best hospitals in the city. Kola visited often but never pressured Amara. He allowed his actions to speak. Slowly, Amara's heart softened. She watched him play with street children at the shelter, help workers lift heavy bags of cement, and spend time in the community without cameras around. He was no longer the billionaire hidden behind glass walls. He was the man she had first met, the one who had sat on a broken bench and eaten plain rice with gratitude. One evening, Amara stood at the doorway of the new shelter, watching Kola hammer nails alongside laborers. He looked up, sweat on his brow, and their eyes met. This time she didn't look away. When he approached, she spoke softly. "You've changed." Kola shook his head. "No, you changed me. You reminded me what it means to live, to love, to be human." Her lips trembled, but she smiled faintly. "And you hurt me." "I know," he admitted, his voice heavy. "And I will spend the rest of my life making it right." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then Amara stepped forward, closing the distance. She looked into his eyes, searching for deception, but found only sincerity. Slowly she nodded. "I forgive you." Relief washed over Kola, his shoulders sagging as though a mountain had been lifted. He took her hands gently, his heart pounding with gratitude. The resolution was not grand, not cinematic, it was quiet, fragile, and real. But in that quiet forgiveness, love bloomed again, stronger than before. Months later, the shelter stood proudly, its walls painted bright, its rooms filled with beds and laughter. Children ran through the courtyard, their joy echoing against the walls. Amara worked alongside Kola, managing supplies and welcoming families in need. Together they built not just a shelter but a sanctuary of hope. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Kola and Amara strolled hand in hand past the very food stall where they had first met. The vendor looked up, startled to see the billionaire standing there, but Kola only smiled and bought a generous serving of roasted corn. This time, instead of eating alone, he handed portions to a group of beggars sitting nearby. Their faces lit up with gratitude, mirroring the same kindness Amara had once shown him. Amara squeezed his hand, her eyes soft. "Do you see now? Kindness doesn't need wealth. It only needs a willing heart." Kola nodded, his throat thick with emotion. "And you gave me that heart, Amara. You gave me everything." They walked on, the city bathed in golden light, their steps in sync. The man who had once been lost in a world of empty riches had found love, not in wealth, not in power, but in the simple, selfless act of a poor woman sharing her last meal. And as the sun set, Their story closed not with wealth gained, but with love redeemed.